All right, by fair consensus, we decided, because it's going to be an impromptu session, that we'll record, because these are fun to go back to. And I'll try to do a good job of naming it impromptu so you can easily find it. Welcome to the June 17th, 2023 SNHU Generative Writing Workshop, completely optional, but supposedly fun. I run these because I think it's really fun to connect with people who write, and then it gives you a chance to connect with people yourselves and to write under extreme pressure and read what you wrote. Does anybody want to ask any questions about writing or writing ideas or, anything? You're muted again, Gretchen, sorry.
For anyone who's written a novel or has studied writing a novel, the 2,500 word limit was a really good exercise in learning how to keep it lean. When you're looking to do something novel-like, what's the best way to go about making sure you maintain that type of directness throughout an entire novel?
One, excellent question, because you should be that lean for the entire novel. That's the quality of writing you want to have. And I think that often, particularly in contemporary novels, that is 2,500 words or less is a chapter length. And so it helps you to treat your chapters as individual units that you then go back and apply that kind of intensity to. So I often, when I'm writing, will write between 1,000 and 2,500 words, really between 1,000 and 2,000. I'm a pretty short writer in my grouping. And then I go back and try to treat it like, by teaching with you all, to treat it like I'm reviewing something for one of our classes.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? I want to point out also, for a novel, like, one of the reasons I think that SNHU's course directors make a 529 short story require a single point of view is they're wanting you to practice that for a novel. So within a chapter, it's very unlikely that you would change a point of view, but you might change it in the next chapter. And so you just want to really be sure you stick with a single point of view. Or if your novel's in an omniscient point of view, you don't have to worry as much because you're going to be using an omniscient narrator. But then, man, I mean, just try not to head hop. If you're going to be in an omniscient point of view, it's almost impossible not to. You have to give a really strong sense that something or somebody or some consciousness, at least, is absorbing everything and telling the story. And that's hard. It's difficult. Trying to think of, is there anything famous you can think of that's told that way? I'm sure there is. I'll bet you that To Kill a Mockingbird is told that way, but maybe not. Is it in Scout's POV?
Yeah, it's through Scout.
Thanks, Randall. Yeah, I don't know.
I've seen books where within a chapter, there's that like hashtag divider line, and then it changes point of
Yeah.
view.
You can.
But those are like when it's really, really, really long, like, 30-page chapters.
Right.
And,
Then they're
Yeah.
almost like sections, and those divider lines are almost like chapters. So you can play around with how you want that structure to look, but you do have to give that indicator. You know who's definitely an omniscient POV is the ballerina, the noise in his dad's head, Harrison Bergeron by Vonnegut.
Oh, okay. Yep.
That one's got to be. And we don't really get inside too many heads, but that voice is telling us in general what's happening. Like, he thinks of his son, and then the noise happens, and we know that the mother doesn't. Oh, they're George and like Hazel because they're my grandparents' names. George thinks of something intelligent, and the noise happens. She doesn't even have intelligent enough thoughts to remember. Like, she seems to be disabled, and maybe an indicator of what the bottom level of intelligence is that they're pushing everybody to, right? That story, seemed so much about a controlling apocalyptic government to me, because your common person was being, they called it handicapped, right? But
Mhm.
you know, who decided who was the handicapper general, and how did the handicapper general get to be smart enough to say you need to be dumbed down, right?
Mhm.
So I think there's such an implied society. I think there would be an amazing, it wouldn't be fan fiction, but if you wrote the story and let these characters come through secretly so that people could go, oh my gosh, it's the backstory to Harrison Bergeron. That
Mhm.
would be amazing. Go write it. I won't. So if you like it, take it.
Yeah, but that doesn't always, I mean, like, there's like, what is it, White Sargasso Sea, that was supposed to be like the other opinion to Jane
It's
Eyre.
amazing.
It's an amazing, but it's not like Jane Eyre.
No, it's not supposed to be.
It's so, I don't know, I read it 2 or 3 times, I've read Jane Eyre 1,000 times, but I'm just so disappointed in it, because I was just like thinking it would be as
No, it's a
amazing.
modernist novel. And the whole point was to speak back against the kind
Yeah.
of writing that the Brontes were doing. Have you read the science fiction, I guess, or fantasy? What would you call it? Where have you read The Air Affair by his last name, Jasper Ford, with 2 F's in Ford, and I think it's
Yes, the name sounds familiar. What's
Yeah.
it called?
The Air Affair, and the Air is of course spelled EYRE. And it's got this literary detective Tuesday
Yes.
nights. Yeah. And
Yes,
it's
I
a
had to
really
look up the
strange series. I
spelling.
couldn't finish the series because it got, less interesting to me, but I love the idea that there's a literary underworld where all the characters are waiting for their book to be read, and then they
Oh,
have to
wow.
act it out, for their it's worth reading the first one just to see the cool idea.
That's like A Plague of Angels, I think it was, by Sherry Tepper, where, was it A Plague of Angels? There were 2. There was Beauty and there was A Plague of Angels. And one of them is that every fairy tale, is all a reincarnation of Beauty and the Beast. And the other one is that every town has to have an arc character living in it. And then there's a switcheroo. So like the witch from, the one town goes to the stepmother town that goes to the this, and what happens when the archetypes all leave their little boxes and go to a different one.
Sounds interesting.
She has some great stuff. Unfortunately, she passed away, so that was the end of that.
So I have a question about how we're going to do today. I wonder if it'll influence what you write if I tell you the book I'm pulling it from. What do you think? Because I'm purposely picking a pop culture book because I'm interested in whether or not it'll influence what you write. Do you want to know the title or don't you?
Sure.
Because
Sure.
what I could do is just hold it up and not say it, and anybody who doesn't want to know could look away. Do you care, or can I just say it?
Just
Say
say
it.
Okay, I'm choosing from the Hunger Games. A very marked up Hunger Games, because I wrote a academic essay on food and something else in the Hunger Games. It's in a book somewhere. So I'll probably end up stopping on like salted plum stew or whatever that stuff was that sounded so amazing that they had in the Capitol. But let's start with this as our impromptu, I'm going to throw you words thing, and see what you come up with. In the beginning, I think we should have, I still think it kicks off really well if you either write about yourself or a character and you say, if, in my case, it'd be Hannah, right? I have a character named Hannah. If Hannah had only known, is how mine would start. But you could say, if I had only known, or if you have a character you're writing right now, write that character's name down. And you start with, if they, so if Hannah had only known, go ahead and write yours down. Then I'm going to start the timer, and in 30 seconds, I'm going to hop in with key words from the Hunger Games. And then, oh, I almost forgot I put these in the chat so that you will be able to go back and see them. This takes more hands than I have. Okay, on your marks, it's set. Right. Your first word is materialized. Materialized. Sponsors. Wounded. Stew. Stew. STW. Stew. Hunted. Desirable. Gutted. Gutted. You have a minute left. No, you don't. I have the other thing. New word. Triumph. Triumph. Disbelief. Disbelief. Indeterminate, and you have a minute left. You got 10 extra seconds. I was muted. Please wrap things up. All right, how did it go, everybody? I gave you a lot of extra time to finish.
That one was fun.
Was it?
Yeah.
Do you feel like your brain got influenced by knowing it? Yeah, that's why I asked. But there's nothing wrong with that. I just wondered, so that now I have two different ways to do the impromptu. One from a book you know, and one just throwing words at you that you don't know where they come from, which is fun.
I felt it was more detrimental because I kept on expecting the words and my brain veered off to the Hunger Game story and tried to push it back.
Yeah, well, I didn't use district and I didn't use tribute, both of which I wanted to use, but I was like, resist, resist. What I will say that's kind of neat is, because I've been doing this a bunch from some literary magazines. And this time I chose a popular book on purpose because I felt like I was having a hard time getting fun words out of literary magazines. And I don't know what to do with that. I mean, that should be the place where I'm getting the most fun words. And maybe I'm just in the wrong literary magazines, or maybe it's because it's a cohesive storyline. So I kind of know what's happening and I know a bit where to look for a good fun word. I used to just point my finger, but I get things like, and which you're already using. So I'd love to hear what somebody got. Does anybody want to start?
I can start.
Okay.
And prefacing this by I just
I think
finished.
we're not allowed to preface.
Okay, we are.
I
I
really want to hear it
reading-
without any kind of influence.
Yeah, no, I just finished reading The Island by Natasha Pierce Preston, which is a YA book, but it's clearly influenced what I wrote.
Okay.
Okay, not to read my handwriting. If if I had known what would happen when I crossed the street that day, I probably would have stayed at home. A car materialized out of nowhere, hitting a tree at the side of the road. The tree bounced back, and then 3 sponsors jumped out, advertising medical services to the wounded driver. He looked up in surprise and then glared at me, as if I had caused the car to hit the tree. He glared and spewed hatred words towards me. I felt haunted by this vitriol. I can't talk today. Vitriol. I stood stuck as if in deep stew, unable to walk away. I felt so hurt and undesirable, totally gutted. Why did he hate me? What did I do? He got out of the car and walked towards me. I backed away. He came closer. Anger and hatred triumphed in his eyes, disbelief in mine. You, he said, you made me do that. You made me total my car. I looked up at him. His age intermediate, his mind clearly unhinged. Me, I asked. You. I dreamt of you. You planned this. You wanted me to crash, to exit this car and then go towards you and fall under your spell. I continued to stare and glare in disbelief. He pulled out a knife, slammed it into me. Not gonna happen, he said.
I'm sorry that a version of you just died this morning. It's interesting. I think you heard me say spew instead of stew.
Yep.
And then I think you heard haunted instead of hunted. So
Yeah.
that was fun because you ended up with some different words that worked really well in your story.
I was trying to look at the chat and see the words, but I was stressed out, and I do I do mishear things.
Well, interesting that the story was told from Elisa's point of view, the main character, but really all the agency belonged to the guy getting out of the car. It's fascinating.
Mhm.
Anybody have any other thoughts?
I can't believe how much you come up with in such a short period of time.
It's really, really stressful.
I think you kind of like being stressed a little bit.
Yeah. It forces me. If someone says to me, you have half an hour to write something, I'll write it out. Someone says you have a day, nothing happens.
Yeah.
It also had a little bit of a dreamscape feel to it. I kind of felt like I was watching the Mad Hatter have a car wreck, and up until he stabbed you, I don't think the Mad Hatter would do that, but
I love that kind of bantery thing where it's like that unfair dialogue. You know, you made me do this.
Yep.
Crazy.
Mhm. I really like how you varied the sentences and just like really went for, I think like the pacing and the tension was built so well. And I was like, oh, dang, I wish I could do that without like even thinking about it. So you did such a great job of like writing this like action, but like, ooh, what's gonna happen next type of scene. So you did really great.
Yeah, it's hard to do in such a short amount of time. And you did have really varied syntax and length of sentences, which was interesting to do, you know, without paying close attention to.
Mhm.
Well, great. Who would like to go next? Y'all
I'll
are
go.
being polite. I was gonna say, just go. Nice job, Randall. I love you're not last.
if Godrin had only known what would happen to Theor, he might have left the fighters alone. He wouldn't have watched as the rot materialized, ending his brother's life without stopping his heart. Sponsors would still come north for his favor. His wife would still smile. His son would still live. Instead, he was wounded past death, his soul cast adrift in the void. He wouldn't stew following battle, wishing he had died. The assassin would not have hunted him, following and poisoning the cup from which his son drank, destroying his life and his father's joy. All that was good and desirable was cast away, leaving naught but a gutted shell of the greatest hero, lost in impotent anger. He howled endlessly, the demon's triumph of the rot, reducing him to this fallen god. Godrin watched in disbelief as his brother caused the stars to wail, and the sky rained blood at his command. Death was meant to be man's end, not this indeterminate hell. Could Theor ever be stopped now that it had come to this?
Are you a poet by trade, Randall?
Part-time.
He is a
I
word.
can hear it.
Yeah.
What was
Yes.
that last sentence? Death would be what? The one before last sentence?
Death was meant to be man's end, not this indeterminate hell.
Wow.
I love watching the chat of the words and predicting. I'm like, Randall's gonna land that last sentence. He's gonna land it. And you did. You did. I'm disappointed because I wanted triumph to be our last word, and then I remembered what I did with the timer. So I love what it's done. I wanted your stories to end differently, and I'm loving what's happening because they aren't, because of the words I threw out there, which is amazing. You know, these are the same I love that this is the same storyline you've been writing, Randall. And so these two brothers, just when I think you can't tell us anything new or deeper about them, you really do. And especially, I agree with Sarah, and I think Elisa said this too, with that line, wounded past death. That's, of course, being so like rotted and wounded that you don't die, but you wish you had. Yeah, that's a really nice way to put it.
Mhm.
Anyone else?
Sarah definitely said the two parts that was absolutely like, yeah, the wounded past death, and also the wish you, or the second to last or last lines. That was wow.
Yep. And I find it also like, I think you're replaying the same scene more or less every time, or the same stage of your book, but every time it's different. So like there's a scene and we know the dad's dying, there's these wars, there's this son poisoning the dad. It's always like the same, it's like a variation, but it's so different every time because of the word choices.
Yeah, it's basically it's kind of the inciting incident that happened off screen before my book started. And I kind of like am constantly mulling that. So it's always on my mind, because it's what, like, honestly, I'm struggling at this point. I'm working on this for my thesis at the moment, and I'm struggling with, I feel like my antagonist is becoming more interesting than my protagonist because of the pain he suffered. Like, I relate to him more than I relate to my protagonist.
That's easy to do. It's kind of like what's the Marvel guy has the slimy thing inside him, the dark
Venom.
yeah, it's kind of like Venom is such a great character, and yet he's technically an anti-hero. So it's easy to do because evil people are interesting. They're like a car crash we can't look away from.
Well, I have a question though. Is
Yes,
it really is it a bad thing that the antagonist is more appealing than the protagonist? It's twisted when it happens.
Only if that's not your main character. Like, you want
Okay.
your main character to carry the story.
Yeah, and I'm also kind of struggling with that too, because the brothers like have a schism. One of them is good, the other one becomes evil, and they are both kind of point of view characters, because it's epic fantasy. I have 3 or 4 point of view characters, and both of them become point of view as it goes on. So
Yeah, and so for epic fantasy, our really traditional ones are what, Tolkien and come on, the other one. And I'm thinking of Tolkien though, like, who is your primary character you walked away from that series with? And the answer will probably differ, right?
Mhm.
But I would assume, like, I used to think when I read it, I was kind of rooting for Frodo the whole way because he seemed like the primary character when it first started. And I got really frustrated reading it because he became so apathetic. And I mean, rightfully so. But, to tell the story of how it took a tribe, took a village, whatever, to do the ring quest. I don't know. I don't know how you deal with that. If I'm frustrated with Tolkien, one of the best writers ever known in the English language, how do you keep your characters from taking over the story away from the reader in a frustrating way?
So in the Cortharian Gambit by Anderley, which started off as like a 7-set series, and then he made two different phases, and then he ended up with like 250 books with 25 co-authors and subsections and subsections. Everyone basically took one book and then turned that book into like a series based on one of the characters in the book. So the main character is the main character throughout all these, and she's constantly referenced, but then there's a side series about the druid, and then suddenly for that the druid is the primary character, and there's a side series about the bodyguard, and then in that series he's the main character. I mean, it's masterful the way he's done it and the way everything is threaded to get together and interconnected. But that's
Right.
how he dealt with it, is he had so many fabulous characters that he made these spin-offs.
But the bigger question for Randall is, how do you succeed in your thesis, right?
Is the thesis class, is it like you make a story from scratch, or is it you based off previous work?
In mine, it was basically you start a new work and you can either do a volume of short stories or the start of a novel. And I'm just finishing up the first thesis class, and it's you have to write between, I think it's 10 to 15,000 words. And then the second half is, I think, roughly the same amount, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and I
But
mean, that should be easy for all of you, based on my experience with everybody complaining about word counts.
But it's not, you don't have to pick like the one I did for 520.
No, it doesn't seem like it to me. I'm doing the one I did for 520, but I don't think it's a requirement. No.
Okay.
All right, any more thoughts for Randall? Who would like to go next?
I'll go.
Wait a minute, Sarah, you can't include "I don't know" repeatedly?
You said that it would be easy for us to come up with all of those words. And I was just saying, well, except for we can't say "I don't know" over and over.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Okay, Gretchen, please.
All right. If Shannon had only known that life was going to be different when she woke up in the morning, she may have had one last drink before bed. The sun was rising and her head was already pounding. The hangover did more than just materialize. It had been sponsored by her boss's transgressions. She had no clue that his ego would be so wounded by calling out his dishonesty. She had been stewing about the cookbooks for over a month and had hunted for a legitimate reason for the discrepancy. That she loved him made it a desirable outcome for the theft. But when none was found, she was gutted by his betrayal. Now that the truth was out, she found a way to make peace with the fact that her morals triumphed over her physical desire. He, however, was in total disbelief that she would choose honesty over him. The price for his misdeeds would follow him for an indeterminate amount of time.
You say you don't know how other people write so much. I don't know how you make these words sound like they belong in really precise writing, but you do. It's really good.
Thank you.
What do y'all think?
I love the stew in the cookbooks, and
Mhm.
I didn't know if you were referring to a cookbooks or whether he was cooking the books.
He was cooking the books.
And I just thought the stew with the cooking books was fabulous.
Thank you.
I absolutely agree with Dr. Max that it feels like you were just like waiting for the words, or you're like, no, I know what she's gonna say before she says it, because it just flowed so cohesively. Like if you were like, yeah, this wasn't from this impromptu, I would have been like, yeah, you're right. Wow.
So it's nothing like the book it came from. Katniss was not in my head.
That's true. There were no books to cook in the Hunger Games, really. Kind of. You could in the capital. Any other thoughts for Gretchen? All right, so I think we're down to Suzanne and Sarah. Do either of you want to share what you got?
I can go.
Okay.
If Alina had only known that she would have had a chance to be selected, her dream to be a champion would have been materialized. She didn't think she would gain Jasper or any of the other sponsors after tending to the wounded child that went viral. She hadn't done it for the fame nor the fortune. She stewed upon the aguilet pinned to her shoulder, the golden color shining in the afternoon sun. She could be desirable, and said she was gutted after learning how champions hunted down anyone who dared to speak against the elites. She sat in disbelief as her fellow champions pumped their fists in triumph. with their new status and job, they would all have an indeterminate amount of food and fortune. Alina didn't know if this was still her dream or if it was her new nightmare.
Ooh,
Ooh, I like that ending.
Thank you.
I like that a lot.
new message. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely nice. That's
Can you
fine.
say this Jew sentence again?
She stood upon the agulette, pinned to her shoulder, the golden color shining in the afternoon sun.
I like that.
Hmm.
I really
It was
like.
strange for me to have somebody use agulette because it's such a military device, you know. I don't know what it's not a device, it's like a
It's like the
symbol.
shoulder, yeah.
Yeah.
I had
Yeah,
one of
no,
those.
I
in
had
the
a
army.
job, I think my sophomore year, where I had to wear one of those in my service dress, and they're uncomfortable because they're under your arm.
I
Yeah,
never knew.
but
I didn't know there was an English word for it. We just called it the braid in the army. It's, goes from here and then it clips onto your front pocket.
uh, it can. Mine buttoned into my epaulette.
So
So
ours goes through the epaulette around, and then there's like a little stringy, and it clips onto like the little, like your khaki shirts have like a, like a pencil pocket, whatever you call those pockets, and it clips onto that.
yeah.
And for us, the different colors are the different cores.
Yeah, so I didn't realize that regular people use the word. So,
I only know it from, I was in JROTC
how are
Okay.
you?
and so otherwise I would not know that word.
I thought it was such a great world building. Like it felt like the beginning of something new, or is this the same character? The name sounded familiar.
I think I have a type for ending characters with very similar names.
Kind of vowel based names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you make up your names, or do you like, I keep on thinking like ruffling through the telephone book. I end up like all my characters are always Mary, Jane, Elizabeth, whatever. And I find a hard time stepping away from using those names over and over.
I use I think it's like fantasy generator something like that, and it just has like so many different names, and so like whenever I get really bored, I'll just like look through different names, and so it just like keeps it in like my index.
What's it called? Fantasy?
I can't remember what it's called. I'll send you a link in Slack because
I think it's fantasynamegenerator.com.
I think it's that one.
Yep.
One of my other favorite sources, and this is a weirdo thing to do, but my husband just thinks it's the weirdest thing, but I love to watch the end of movies, and I watch the credits, and I like to pick out first and last names that I like in there. And one of the things that it'll do is give me a lot of like a variety of cultural names, and then I can break them up. Like I can take a pretty Russian sounding name and maybe give it, actually my friend who wrote that The Mountain and the Sea sci-fi book, he must be doing something like that, because his names would kind of combine things like Thai sounding names with Russian endings and that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's one way to broaden the sense that the names aren't just flat out American or English based.
I don't
One
know
thing-
if any of you have been watching Fauda, but one of the main characters there is called Steve. And it's such I mean, Israel obviously is a culture where everyone, it's moved in and from other countries. But he's so Israeli. And when he talks to his parents, it's in Hebrew and it's, not accented and everything else. But to have this one character, his name is Steve, amongst all the very, very Israeli and very, very Arabic names, stands out.
Randall, what were you saying?
One thing that I'll do too for names is I'll go to Google Translate, and if I have a concept for a character of who I want them to be, I will type in something related to their name. Like I have one character that she had to leave her village because she was being hunted as a witch, and she jumped in a river and nearly drowned, and she washed up at a sorcerer city. So I wanted her name to mean something related to river. So when I went looking, I found the Turkish word for from the river is Irmak. So that's what I named her as a character. And
is-
that's something I use a lot for names.
I love that. I was naming a fantasy country Loshatistan because Loshad is horse in Russian. So that was kind of fun. Yeah. Cool.
That is very cool. I like that. Thank you.
So, Sarah, are you interested in reading what you got?
I can try.
Okay, thanks.
If Cassie had only known that Rachel was going to swing the bat backward right into her ribs, she may have stood somewhere else before the bat created bruises or caused bruises to materialize along her ribs. Commercial sponsoring ace bandages and cold creams ran through her head as she dropped to the grassy ground, wounded, but trying to rise. She knew Rachel would stew in guilt and remorse at having hurt her. As friends, they'd hunted for safe space that they could just hang out and nothing undesirable would come near them. The metal baseball bat will no longer have a home in this safe space, since it made Cassie almost puke her guts out, trying to regain a flow of oxygen. That being said, Cassie knew she'd prepared Rachel for triumph in her game the next day. Rachel had the skill, but Cassie hoped to dispel the disbelief in Rachel, to make sure she knew that her value is not indeterminate, regardless of playing softball or what happened at home.
I love that you always are capable of like playing with the word, like taking desirable and making it undesirable, or like you're quick on your feet with how you're going to use the words. It was the same thing as Gretchen. They came in really naturally. I feel like you could have written that and those words could still exist there, whether I'd thrown them out or not.
Mhm.
What else?
I really like the puke her guts out because it was so different from the rest of your words. So I felt like the rest of your words had this like solemn cadence and they were like highbrow or like good words. And then puke her guts out is like lower. So like I felt by throwing it in there, it's like, oh, we're all la-di-da, It really really worked. I like it.
Thank you.
What I noticed is obviously if you're talking about two very close friends, if one does something to the other, there's a lot of guilt ensued with it. You didn't even have to say that she felt guilty. I think we would have already known that, though in such a short space, you depicted something that really meant a lot to both of them and that they would be there for each other no matter what. I thought that was really cool.
Thank you.
And you established that relationship really tightly. I mean,
Mhm.
to have written for 6 minutes and to have us know that these two people will know each other their entire lives because they are there for each other no matter what. That's obvious in what you wrote. And I think that's difficult to do, to characterize a relationship like that so quickly. It's really something.
Mhm.
All right, has everybody gone?
Yep.
Good. All right, so you know the drill. Pick a sentence you like out of this. Pick something that is working for you or something you think is worth exploring a little further. Any sentence you want. If you want to like shake these up, take a different character, do whatever, just pick a sentence you have written and take things in a new direction. And no, that's the whole point of this exercise, is that you might have drafted something down when you were free writing, and then you go back into what you wrote and find what's useful to you and you move forward with it. So that's why we're doing this exercise this way. Okay, so I hope you've chosen a sentence. Go ahead and get started and write. We have just over a minute left. Okay, try to wrap things up. Who's interested in going first this time? You people who are still writing.
I can go first.
Okay. Thanks, Suzanne.
Elena had sat in disbelief as her fellow champions pumped their fists in triumph. The large banquet hall became smaller and smaller, the wool collar stiffening around her neck, the metal draped around her, strangling her. She didn't want this. The thought plowed through her, washing away any excitement that had been rooted in her core. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Jasper at attention. The heat from his gaze made her want to run. The smallest shake from his head, he turned his attention back to the general at the podium. Alina did the same, trying to breathe the way her mother taught her as the noose tightened around her neck.
Wow.
Mm,
You,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, Randall.
I was just gonna say, is this a narrative that you've been working on or just kind of something that's popped into head today?
Just today.
And you're gonna keep working on it, right?
I think I like Alina in this world.
Yeah, I like it. I think you've got a lot of potential with the stuff you've come up with. I really felt like, it feels like you have a little bit of an established narrative arc already. So I kind of figured this was something you were already working on.
Thank you. Yeah, no, this is born from today.
Wow.
well, the thing of it is now it's a cliffhanger. Why does she feel like she has a noose on her neck? We
Does
want to
she
know
literally?
more.
Yeah.
Right.
What I hung up on, and it sent me off in another direction, was she realizes she doesn't want this, but she is dressed in all the stuff. So she got there somehow. So at some point she thought she did want it. And I have been sort of binging my own version of Candy on Emily Henry novels. And she does these long extended people not, they're saying the same thing but not understanding it from each other for like the entire novel, which is frustrating. But the one thing she's really good at is helping characters realize they've been working so hard towards something they don't want. And I think that's a really interesting thing to have happen with characters, because I think you can read a lot of memoirs and see that people live entire lives and go, oh, but I meant to be the person I always thought I was.
Mhm.
That's a note that I made about your first piece too, was that lack of complete closure is, to me, that's a strength. If you can, there are things you have to wrap up and then questions you have to answer, but if there are small things that you can leave unresolved, to me, it makes it feel more believable.
I didn't know, I felt there were a lot of juxtapositions. So it's like she looks at his smoldering gaze, or whatever the words were. Usually that means you like someone, but there was this love-hate kind of she's not quite sure. And then the noose I felt was the was it a real noose? Was it this, the clothing is just like so oppressive? But clearly it's also a real noose. Like there was, I felt there was a lot of double usage going on there.
And like Gretchen said, I think every one of us on this Zoom today would turn the page. So.
Yep.
Please write the next page. We're interested. Okay, who's next? We're definitely want to keep moving because we'll run out of time.
I'll go.
Thanks, Gretchen.
No problem. Now that the truth is out, she found a way to make peace with the fact that her morals triumphed over her physical desire. In the past, Shannon would have swept his theft under the rug because her only value was tied to his impression and thoughts of her. But now, shutting her eyes from the brightness of the sun, she valued her personal strength over what he would say the next time they spoke. It's taken over 40 years, but with a little faith, the support of her friends, and trust in herself, she was able to walk away and not fear looking back. Finally, the ghost of her mother's disapproval and the thirst of her father's love would not manipulate how she chose to live in her world or who she would invite into it. Did it feel like a huge risk? Absolutely. Did it feel right? Without question.
Nice.
Ooh, I love that ending. Oh my gosh.
I don't know why I tend to ask questions. My characters ask questions out loud. I think I do that to myself. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing in writing, but sometimes I think it just sort of pulls people in. How would they answer the question? Maybe not. Maybe it's distracting.
I think a nice balance works. Asking questions is wonderful because it does make the reader like bring in their sympathy or empathy, depending on the situation with the character. But at the same time, with your character at this point, like we really understand this entire relationship and we're ready now to go into scene and have something happen. You know, so you've done this great job of getting us inside her head, and this is necessary writing. And your next step, if you kept following the storyline, would be for her to dump papers at the DA's office, or you know, whatever it takes to continue her moral, upstanding behavior. And I loved that you used setting there with the bright sun, because she closes her eyes against the bright sun, and that could be the bright sun of how attracted she is to him, or it could be a literal bright sun of that day. Either way, it works great because the sun itself could be like standing in for the attraction she felt for this guy. So that came out really nice.
Well, I can tell you how it ends. She gets his job.
Good. Keep writing that.
I felt this could almost be like a flashback scenario that, you know, or just coming at it from like different angles that, you know, and the one, she's, you know, at the party and whatever, and then she's explaining how she got there, and now we go back to the party and now we're going to see her taking him down. And I think like it could be one of those in and outs.
Yeah.
Are you writing it as a story or is it going to be a novel?
I have no idea.
Well,
Until this moment, I
didn't.
didn't know a thing about it.
Oh, so you know how it ends though. That's fantastic.
Yeah, because as I'm writing, yeah, she's going to take his job.
Yeah. Well, you might very well be either in one of those foreshadowing first chapters, like a preface-y chapter that lets us have the action at the end, and maybe you'll take us back to the beginning. I really feel like you could have a big story there if you wanted to.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down.
I'm working with, I have some friends from a writing retreat I went to that we do a workshop together once a month on Fridays, and he has one where it opens up with this amazing scene and then suddenly it's 3 years later. So those are things that you can do with a standalone chapter up front that either can be the 3 years later chapter where we're like, oh, how are we going to get here? And then you can move back and start, or like he did, you know, have this moment and go, what happened in between?
Oh, okay. That's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more thoughts for Gretchen? Okay, who would like to read next? Okay, Sarah. You're muted.
I'll underread it because it's different than something that I've written before.
Oh, good.
As friends, they'd hunted for a safe space. Across the street from their ghetto was a hill called Radar Hill. In the winter, it was the best of sledding hills. On top of it boasted a large forest, largely untraveled by anyone but them, considering whether to build a fort by moving branches and leaves, but they happenstance on a clearing they've never seen before, but they should have had. They'd explored for years. The clearing had a 4-post structure holding a tin rippled roof. Gnarly roots climbed the 4 posts in all but one spot, the spot below an arch. It beckoned to them. Rachel started ahead, but Cassie grabbed her arm. "Let me," Cassie said. As the oldest in this tribe of 2, she walked protectively in front of Rachel. Her breath quickened, and after a few steps, she realized she was moving to the beat, a beat coming from under that archway. Cassie grabbed a long branch. A sparkle gleamed, catching Cassie's eye. There was a metal point at the top of the branch she had just picked up.
Woo!
I get it. Don't stop.
Yeah. No, I'm so excited. Cassie she's about to go off world or something, isn't she? Oh, yes. That was really exciting. Sorry, I jumped in. Everybody, what do you think?
You had me at beckoned.
You did an excellent job of capturing imagery. You really captured that feeling of like the way kids see the world. And I don't know if you've seen the movie or read the book Bridge to Terabithia, but that's what your story reminded me of.
Okay.
Mhm.
I love that.
Came across a clearing that they didn't know, but they should have. I was like, oh my God, here we go. The world has changed. Oh, beautifully done. Sorry, I'm jumping in on top of everybody else. What else?
No, I
Is
love
that
it.
the first? Oh, go ahead.
No, I loved it. I loved the plants growing into everything, and I could smell the dirt and smell the mud, and it was fabulous. It like really, even though you didn't say like too much about like the woods and the feelings, but we could get it. Like
Mhm.
we know what it looked like and
Mhm.
smelled like, and all the senses were there.
Yep.
Have you written fantasy before?
No, but it's what I want to write. I'm often compelled to write other types of stuff, but fantasy is what I actually want to write.
I think
Cassie
you're
going.
deserves
allowed
a
to.
fantasy adventure.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think
Definitely.
that you are walking through an archway to write some fantasy. And I think the perfect character for you to write into it is Cassie with her friend Rachel. I mean, I'm really excited.
Yep.
Suzanne, I think I talked over you like 100 times. Did you have something to add?
Oh my gosh, no, yeah, everything that everyone said, I loved it. I really like the imagery, especially of like I can't remember exactly what you said, but like the curvy tin roof, it brought me like right there. I was like, oh, yep, it's cold. There it is. And like what Dr. Max was also saying, like they should have like seen it. Oh, I love that. And I was like, ooh, fantasy.
And
So now you
particularly,
set the bar up really, really high for next time, because now you have to carry on with this.
well, particularly, I'd like to emphasize that because we know Cassie's background, because we've been with her a lot, and we know Rachel shares her background, what 2 better characters to send into a fantasy world? Because they need to escape the world that they're in. And so what's going to happen to them because they deserve it? Like, what's the alternate, the parallel life they could have in this fantasy world that they didn't get to have in this world? And I don't even know if you might have them know what they could have had in this world and how it's different or whatever. I mean, I don't know. There's definitely a quantum universe possibility there also, because I'm into those. Yeah, just super excited, Sarah. That was really different for you, and it's such an exciting direction.
Thank you.
All right, that leaves us with Elisa and Randall. Is that right?
Mhm.
I believe that Randall's being polite, so Elisa, do you want to go?
Sure. He pulled out a knife and stabbed me. I felt it cut through my thin tee, graze my skin, and then nothing. A tiny scratch, a little bit of pain, nothing much. I straightened up. He pulled the knife back out. Crap, he said. Wrong knife. The sponsors from the tree jumped out at us. Safety first, first, they sing-sang. The prop knife's blade collapsed back into its shaft. The tip bent a little. The moment was laughable. You, he glared again. Me, I said. I saw you in the dream. I killed you. I wanted to kill you. Why? I don't know. He shook his head. Something, I dreamt it. Sirens came toward us, accompanied by flashing lights. Men in white coats got out of the van. James, not again, they said. Looking towards him, they pulled out a coat, pulled him into the van, and drove off.
Oh,
Wow.
So it
First of
was
all,
the
the
Mad
prop-
Hatter.
Yep.
or
The
was
prop
it?
knife was the prop knife was a perfect twist. Would never see that coming. That was awesome.
Thank you.
I agree.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming either. I was looking at it trying to think, where do I go from here? And I'm like, oh wait, this is cute.
But you could have something like, is he crazy or did he really see her? I mean, what you have to play with in the fiction world and with the tropes we know can work in these kind of crazy stories is he genuinely crazy? Or did he actually see her in a dream, and will she go pursue him in the madhouse, which, I mean, I don't even know if we have those in America anymore. Will she go there to some psych ward and try to find out more, or will she just brush it off as some strange incident? And how did he get a car, and how did he get a fake knife? And Sarah's asking, how did the blade tip get bent?
Probably, I don't know. I'd have to look into them because I don't know anything about prop knives, but I mean, I presume if it like hit a bone or something, I don't know.
It just collapses back into the handle.
Oh,
That's what a prop
yeah.
knife does. So nothing would hit her but the actual handle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
More thoughts?
I enjoyed that. I really did. I thought that was really cool.
The delivery of crap, wrong knife was great.
Yep.
It had the feel of a Jasper Ford novel, I want to say. That kind of Keystone Cop feel of things happening really quickly and there being just a edge of ridiculous to it in a good way. That their scene is hyperbolically not what it appeared to be when it started.
We can work on this, turn it into something.
Yeah, it's fun.
Mhm.
I need something fun to like ease my brain out of the last 9 weeks.
Yeah, go for fun, definitely after that.
Yeah.
Okay, Randall?
Right. Death was meant to be man's end, not this indeterminate hell. Since the coming of the destroyer and the death of God, there was no more room in the afterlife for mortals. The Almighty had started the eviction process as well. The long dead returned to their desiccated vessels, howling insanity to the night sky. Tristan hacked his way back into the castle, recognizing his father and sister in the press, taken by the fever so many years ago. He grimaced at the 4 arrow holes that decorated his torso with crusted blood. They'd stopped bleeding weeks ago, when the furious thunder of his heart had finally fallen silent. The wounds wouldn't kill him, but they would never heal. He tried to ignore the impossibly vast tendrils writhing across the moon, but they were as inescapable as the stench of 100 generations of mortality that pressed the walls. He slammed through the gate, listening to scrabbling hands, to breathless groans. He started a prayer, and then he laughed. Who the hell am I praying to?
Ooh.
Wow.
All right, there's a lot to unpack there. Eviction process of mortals. I wrote that down. I saw Sarah, I think you put that in the chat too. That was priceless. And you said something just before that. I don't remember what it was. There wasn't enough room or something.
I said, since the coming of the destroyer and the death of God, there was no more room in the afterlife for mortals.
Yes, that was amazing. And then I also liked press the walls. And then laughing at prayer. Those were all really stark comments that really stuck out.
I love the trindles of the moon, going over the moon, because it's like you're in this weird ghosty area of all these people, you know, whatever they are coming back. And just looking at the moon, even though it was still scary and still within that darkness, but it like allowed you to break away for a millisecond from what was going on. And it sort of gives you time to come back to the horror of what this poor person is going through, finding out of space and out of time, and everyone's back and it's all crowded and horrible. So it like gave us a moment away and then a moment back.
The world building, wow. And especially like the details of like the wounds that will never heal but will still like ooze. Like I can super picture like everything that's going on to your description and imagery. Fantastic.
You say a breathless grunt.
A breathless groan.
Yeah, that was nice. Because, you know, when we think of zombies, they aren't supposed to be breathing, but yet they, you know, exude sounds that come from air. So having that happen is really interesting. And the one thing that I would ask about this project you're doing with your thesis is, are you dealing in questions of sort of time and the present? And the reason I ask is that every single dead body that's emerging from this afterlife that no longer has room, that had their eviction notice, thinks that where they were is their place, because when it was their time, that was their location. And that's why they're trying to get in the castle, obviously, because that they think they're going home or to where they worked or whatever. And I just wonder how you're like, what's that big question that you're asking about? What does being in the present moment mean, where you're treading over territory that belonged to somebody else in a past time? Is that something you're working with?
This was actually kind of just a spin-off. It's an idea that I've kind of kicked around, but it's not related to the same project. So,
Oh, okay. Okay.
but yes, those are questions on this one. That's one reason it's still in the box, because I've got a lot of thought that I'm trying to give to that on that regard, like you're talking about with, you know, the time and the space.
Yeah. I think I've said this in this group before, but Orson Scott Card wrote a series called Pathfinder, and he's dealing with that same question of people overlapping in space over different times. So that one's a really interesting one, I think, if you're interested in looking at that. And to Elisa's point about a bunch of spin-offs, he does spin-offs in his Ender's Game series. You know, his books have like being the main protagonist, and I think one with his brother being the main protagonist. So maybe Orson Scott Card, if you can. Some people can't stomach him. I thought I couldn't, and then I couldn't stop reading him once I started. So
I'm the same way. I love his stuff.
yeah.
Some of them, he wrote The Left Hand of God, I think, as well. Didn't he?
I don't think so, but maybe.
And it
That
was
was a woman, like Ursula Le Guin or
maybe.
someone. Ooh, I just read a Margaret Atwood novel called Cat's Eye. Not
Yeah.
what I expected. I just grabbed it and read it because it was Margaret Atwood, and what a interesting novel. Worth reading, but nothing like the other, like Oryx and Crake or The Handmaid's Tale.
No, I was wrong. It wasn't him. Someone else. It was
Okay.
Paul Hoffman. Yeah.
But a guy. Okay.
Mm.
That was everybody?
Yep.
We made it. Wow. That was just an incredible, you know, imaginative leap that everybody took. I love the direction that it went, and that especially Sarah, I'm so excited you wrote something different with the characters we knew. That just blew my mind, and I'm here to have my mind blown. So it's fantastic. I think the next time we'll be doing this, I'm looking at the calendar. So the term ends on the 25th. And so I imagine, because it starts on the 3rd, I would be trying to host it on the 8th. I would understand that some people might not make it because you might be, I would think 4th of July stuff would be the weekend before, but who knows? I'll probably try to host it on the 8th.
Yeah, I won't be able to make it, but that's okay. I'll be there the
Well,
time after.
It'll be recorded. Which, by the
Okay.
way, I should stop recording.